This is a Socialist News and Views special interview.
I'm Nick Schillingford, coming to you from the Urban Cabin Studios in South Minneapolis with this special interview. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Hi, Nick. It's going well. How are you?
Good, good. So, yeah, on Socialist News and Views, we let folks introduce themselves. Do you want to just tell our audience who you are?
My name is Matt Pogachnik. We have lived in South Minneapolis for 20 years now.
Wow.
It's
awesome.
It's wild. I can't believe that it's been this long, but we've been in this same house for 20 years. My wife and I have a couple of kids. She's a realtor, and I work for Costco.
Oh, nice.
And we've got a poodle, a white standard poodle. We just love this city, and just really enjoy our life here. It's pretty great.
I agree. Yeah, I've been here 13 years, and in this house here, and I was, coming to Minneapolis all the time before that because I just like, stuff that's going on in Minneapolis, and there's people and there's things happening, and I just think it's a great city. And obviously you do as well. As I already well know, I read the Racket article recently. My mom is the one who sent it to me because she's like, "This is your kind of thing. You should read this article."
That's awesome.
And in the article, M. Castle, I believe that's how you pronounce it. The article is called "Where's All the Good Garage Art in South Minneapolis These Guys Know," again by M. Castle. And in the article, they discuss your years of finding and posting garage murals in South Minneapolis to social media. Can you just kind of tell me how you got started doing that, and why you've continued to do that for years now? It sounds like.
Well, yeah.
When did it start? How did it start?
What did it start like? Well, since I work retail, I have odd days off, and so I'm off during the week. And once both our kids were all day school age, I kind of got left with a lot of time on my hands. And so I started just walking. I just go for walks for the sake of going for a walk, and started walking, down by the creek. We're not too far from the creek. And, I'd usually end up near a restaurant or something that I've been wanting to try, have some lunch, have a beer. Inexplicably, many of these walks, would end up at sea salt. I don't know how that happened. There's just one. I couldn't tell you what the very first garage that I saw, or if I was just taking a shortcut down an alley. And there are quite a few garages, street facing garages that are decorated.
Right.
And
I didn't really know, to be honest, I didn't really know there was that many in the alleys that were decorated. I kind of I've been down some alleys. I kind of assumed that most of the garages with murals were like were street facing. And I've always kind of wanted to put a mural on my garage too. I even have some people I thought about reaching out to, but I was like, well, maybe it doesn't make sense. Maybe nobody does that because they're only do it on the street facing ones. But then when I read the article, I was like, oh, there's way more murals out there that I've probably been missing because I haven't been thinking about that. So that's cool.
It's crazy. It's nuts how many there are.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you. But something happened where I started, I did, in that article, I talked to Em about, there's a local writer, Andy Sturdivant, who had a running column in Min Post called The Stroll.
Mm.
And he would talk a lot about, like, one time he like walked or canoed the whole length of Minnehaha Creek, or
Wow.
he would just talk about, like, he would walk along Chicago Avenue, the whole length of it or a certain length of it, and kind of write about the history of the places along there. And then there's this other guy, local guy, Ed Kohler. He was, for a while, he's kind of gone quiet now, but for a while he was big on social media, and he ran I think he may have finished, but his big goal was to like run every street in Minneapolis.
That's awesome.
And yeah, and then he would post about it, and he would post kind of like architectural stuff, kind of like Andy did, about the places that he ran. So then, so I've, in my previous life, I have my Master of Fine Arts, and so before the kids came along and mortgage came along, the plan was to teach art. I was into ceramics, so I was going to teach ceramics and have, I guess, the life of an academic artist. And that didn't really work out. So
it almost never does.
So
work out the way
it almost never does. Yep. and so mixing all that together, and I'm out on these walks, and I start to notice that there's more than just a couple of these garages. So I just kind of made a conscious decision, and this was, based on, and again, in the article, I talk about one of the things I learned when I was in grad school was about the Situationists, the kind of the lettrist international.
Right.
The Situationists were, a bunch of French artists, philosophers, and one guy in particular, Guy Debord, came up with this idea of the spectacle. And so, the theory is that under capitalism, the spectacle is the thing that is manufactured by the system to keep us from becoming aware of how our existence is being commodified. And so and ultimately, like, how if the system can keep us looking over there, then we don't really realize, we won't realize how much of ourselves we're giving up, our humanity we're giving up to participate in the system.
Yep.
It's like the idea of, you're getting the pellet from the feeder, and
right.
everything's good. So their whole thing was, okay, we got to break that.
Right.
And how do we break that? And so one of the things that they came up with was this concept of psychogeography, and this is getting pretty long, but
no, that's fine. I'm interested.
Okay. So the psychogeography is about, like, literally the geography of where you live, where you exist. And that itself is a system. And so one way to break that is by not paying any attention to the way the grid wants you to move through space. And so they would do that by doing this thing. Well, my French is terrible, but it's dérive,
sure.
D-E-R-I-V-E, and it literally translates to mean drift. And so if you drift through space, and by staying out of the grid, the literal grid of a city, then you are hopefully undoing you're escaping sort of the thrall of the spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
So what ended up happening was I realized I could sort of indulge the intellectual part of me that was
Nice.
still inside there from grad school. And then, like, when it turned out that there were hundreds of these garages, I just kind of said, okay, well, I guess I'm the guy who's going to document these.
Yep.
And so that's kind of how it started. And then it turns out there's that, in the article, there's this other guy, Christian, who like kind of does the same thing, but in a very different way, which I just find fascinating. And he's a super nice guy. I've never met him, but we've talked online a little bit.
Nice.
But so that's kind of how it started. And then, except for I stopped for about a year for one summer, the summer of George Floyd and the uprising and everything.
Sure.
But basically since about 8 years ago, I just, when I have the opportunity, I go out for a walk. I hit the alleys. There's no plan. It's always walking. It's always from my house. It's always like I never drive to a spot and walk from there.
Right.
And I just hit the alleys with no plan. And
I love it.
Thanks.
I mean, I think it's great, and I think I think we might put too little stock in little things that we can do, or different ways that we can approach things to change it up a little bit. I mean, I think creativity is a big piece of figuring out how to build the better world that we want to build. I mean, I've been doing a similar thing. So I have this podcast, and I actually originally had started the podcast back in coming out of the Occupy movement. So that was like probably in 2012, 2000 into 2013, something like that. And then I had a bunch of bad stuff happen at the end of 2013, so I kind of wrapped it up. And it's weird because I thought podcasts were like kind of known back then, and like I guess we called it internet radio, but there was podcasts, but like they're like way more popular now than they were then. So anyway, in 2020 is when I restarted the podcast, the same podcast, essentially just kind of like picked it up again. But like the interference and the algorithms and all that stuff is like 10 million times worse than it was. Just the control of everything is so bad compared to 2013. It's like it's almost impossible to like break through the noise and actually like connect with people and get them to like organically, participate in stuff without a lot of work. So I thought, well, maybe I can bring it back into the in real life world. So instead of trying to go through the internet, I could bring it back into so I started doing this free books table. So I've been going to like library bag sales. Moon Palace Books had a bunch of used book sales this at the beginning of the summer, where you could get bags of books for $5. I volunteer at Mayday Books in Cedar Riverside, and so I buy some used books from there, or sometimes there's other books that they are like, okay, this has been here a long time and we need to get it moving, or for whatever reason. So different ways that I get the books, and then I set up this table, with pretty decent books, a lot of political books, but also like literature and science and other stuff that I think is pertinent to the struggle, or just people getting better, or the world getting better. But anyway, so I've been setting up this table to try to get it out. I'm not sure how well it's working, but it's kind of taken on for promoting the podcast anyway, but it's kind of taken on a life of its own. It's almost like maybe can be more more popular than the podcast. But anyway, so I've been setting up this book table, and then I used to do a lot more walking. Like a few years back, I would go on like really long, ridiculous walks that people thought were like impossible or something.
Right.
And
Right.
it kind of came to fruition. I did a 68-mile walk from my house to some property that my family owns out in Wisconsin, where I have a little campsite out there.
Holy smokes.
It's just like, so actually my dad, I didn't want to do it on my own, so I finally had roped my father into doing it with me. So we had to walk, it was some trails. We walked past the state fair, the first day of the state fair, and we're like, why is there all this traffic? We walked on, some paths. We ended up walking on some like pretty sketchy, state highways in the rain and stuff that I probably wouldn't do again.
Right. I was going to say.
We made our 68 mile. We got there. It was ridiculous. That was like the most ridiculous thing I did. But I used to walk out to my dad's house in Egan sometimes, which I think was like, I don't know, 15 miles or something like that. Or I don't know, maybe it's a little less than that. But anyway, I'd walk out there and I really got the feeling, like, for example, when I was like, over by like Fort Snelling, and then you go like across like the 55 bridge.
Yep.
Or the, 5/55. I really got the feeling like I was stepping outside of the Matrix when I was going across that bridge, especially like the drivers would look at me like, what is a human being outside of a vehicle, or a bicycle doing this far from civilization or something? I don't know. It was such an odd experience. I really felt like I had stepped outside of something. And I think that's exactly what you're describing in the Situationist piece. So lately I've been going around. I haven't been walking as much lately. And so I'm like, I need to get out and walk. And so I've been motivating myself by, I had an event that I was supposed to go to at the free books table, and then it got canceled. So I kind of had more books than I'd like to hold on to at one time, since I only have, a regular house. I don't have any fancy place to store all these books. So I was like, well, I should start putting some of them in the free libraries, around here that are getting low on books, or, circulate them around. So I've been getting out every day and trying to do a little loop and hit some of the free libraries, even on the really cold days. Cause I got a lot of little free libraries in my neighborhood. So that's been my new thing, just to make sure that I'm getting out and walking every day if I can, is get out and hit up the little free libraries. And then, kind of what you were talking about yesterday, I found this book. I guess it's a kid's book. I found it in a library not that far from my house, Brave Potatoes by Toby Speed and Barry Root. It's just ridiculous. It's a ridiculous book. I mean, in a good way, I think. And it's like poetic and rhythmic. It's a little bit dark. It's kind of like dark, like the Brave Little Toaster or whatever is a little bit dark when you go back and...
Yeah, you got to have some darkness there.
Watch that. But anyway, it's really funny. I don't know. I just grabbed the book. I was like, I got to read this book, Brave Potatoes. It's quite a title. But I read it and I kind of got into it, and I'm like, I never would have found that if I wasn't going out and doing something, out of the ordinary. I never would have come across that book on my own. I've read it to a few people already. But I do have my copy of Society of the Spectacle here, too.
There you go. That's the one.
Guy Debord.
Yep.
However you pronounce it. It's a great copy, too. It's the one where, like, it's just a bunch of people. I don't know if they are, like, 3D glasses or something, but they've all got glasses on, and they're sitting in a big auditorium, and there's a bunch of them. I think it's my favorite cover of this book because it really gives me the feeling.
Yeah.
I was just gonna read the first 4 little blurbs in the book here, just to give people an idea of what the book is like. Because you did a good job explaining it, but it can be a little tough to get into when you first pick up Society of the Spectacle. You can be like, what is... So it says...
What is he talking about? Yeah.
Exactly, right? And I came to Society of the Spectacle through another person that had recommended it. So the first chapter is called Separation Perfected, and it's divided into, like, a few dozen little paragraphs. Well, anyway, so 1... In societies where modern conditions of production prevail, all of life presents itself as an immense accumulation of spectacles. Everything that was directly lived has moved away into a representation. 2. The images detached from every aspect of life fuse in a common stream in which the unity of this life can no longer be reestablished. Reality considered partially unfolds in its own general unity as a pseudo-world apart, an object of mere contemplation. The specialization of images of the world is completed in the world of the autonomous image, where the liar has lied to himself. The spectacle in general, as the concrete inversion of life, is the autonomous movement of the non-living. 3. The spectacle presents itself simultaneously as all of society, as part of society, and as an instrument of unification. As a part of society, it is specifically the sector which concentrates all gazing and all consciousness. Due to the very fact that this sector is separate, it is the common ground of the deceived gaze and of false consciousness, and the unification it achieves is nothing but an official language of generalized separation. 4. The spectacle is not a collection of images, but a social relation among people mediated by images. And, you know,
Yes.
I kind of understand it now, but when I first got into it, I was like, what in the heck is being said there? But I think it's, you know, I think it's really interesting as, you know, as you get into it more, you realize how it's, I'm sure it's applicable historically at the time, whatever, 67, whenever he's writing it. But I mean, especially now, it's like, especially with like social media and the internet and stuff. I mean, it's like, it seems so relevant.
It's extremely relevant, and it's like, I always find it interesting that I don't think I know that, like, you know, when the Wachowskis made the Matrix, I'm not sure that Society of the Spectacle ever came up. It was more like Bachelard and some other stuff, you know, Simulacra,
right.
that they were using as an inspiration for that. But, you know, the Society of the Spectacle like locks right into that idea of the Matrix.
Right.
But now, you know, in this current context, it's stunning,
right,
how close it is to what we feel like we're experiencing. And you know, that is what is so cool about what you're doing with the book table and the little free libraries, and, you know, and what people do with their garages. It's, you know, it's just all the little ways. I don't know, you know, the context of Society of the Spectacle was, you know, the Paris, you know, the student protests in the late 60s, and it seems like, you know, right now today, it seems like, you know, that sort of collective action is almost not possible, like nowadays. And so I think it comes down to, at least currently, the little ways, like the little free libraries, and, you know, and like the garages, just all these small ways that you can kind of just sort of prick at the, you know, the edges of the thin edges of the spectacle, and break free for a little bit. I'm probably going to end up being very wrong about the collective thing, because I think we are going to have to kind of, you know, there's going to have to be a movement to sort of.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to break out at some time. You know, how and what it looks like is, you know, not as clear. You know, the history of the organizing and stuff is not super within people's minds. You know, I mean, I think we somewhat saw that even with the uprising, that, you know, there was a lot of energy, but, you know, to some degree it dissipated, possibly, you know, without immediately at least achieving a lot of its goals. I say that that's still kind of radiating out. I mean, it's still having a huge impact internationally. I've kind of covered this on the show a little bit, you know, in like Latin America and in Europe and stuff like that. I mean, people are still talking about it. There's still, you know, there's murals of George Floyd in Gaza, and there's murals of George Floyd in Cuba and South America. And I mean, they're still talking about this, you know, issue of, you know, especially black racism, you know, in Latin America and Europe and stuff. So, I mean, I think it's an ongoing thing, and, you know, we may need to rely on some other people in the international struggle to give us some direction. Cause I mean, you know, the US is a pretty new country, and it does have some history of struggle, but there's certainly we could learn things.
for
Yeah,
sure.
it says the Society of the Spectacle was written in '67, so this is like right coming up on the '68 student
Yep.
uprising. So this is kind of some of the thoughts right before that. But yeah, I think you can make a huge, you can make an impact, and it's not like we said, like it said, it's not just images, but it's the relation between people. And so I think what you're
Right.
doing with these little pieces is you're kind of interrupting the standard relations between people, and you really see that like with this free book table I've been setting up. Um, it's so funny. Like some people, even I've been setting up. We've been setting up at the really free market in Whittier. They have it at
Oh
Whittier
yeah.
Park first Saturday
Yeah.
of the month during March to November. And even then, people are like, "So these are all free?" And you're like, "Yeah, take as much as you want." And they're like, "Okay, I'm going to take this one. I can take this one,
Yeah.
right?" And you're like, "Yep." And they're like, "And I can also take this one." And I'm like, "Yep." It's like you can see like it like breaking down those barriers, but it's still like there's so much history and imagery and tradition and propaganda, there that it's like almost impossible. I mean, the destruction of like third spaces, like there's nowhere to go
Right.
where you don't have to buy something.
Right.
So this feeling of like, oh, I'm going here and then I just like get stuff for free. It's like it feels weird because it doesn't feel right. But I mean, this stuff can carry on. I mean, like the 1968 student movements in France. The funny thing is, I've still been finding movies from like 1968 that never really got released because they were supposed to go to like Cannes Film Festival, but it got canceled.
Yeah.
So it's like
Oh, that's right. Yes.
one of them is well, the movie Skidoo. It's a very silly movie. It's an Otto Preminger film, and it's kind of like trying to combine old actors. It's actually the last film that Groucho Marx was in.
Oh my gosh.
He's
Okay.
in it as like it's so weird. He's in it as like a like mob boss or something. It's very silly. But anyway, so he's trying to combine like old stuff and like the counterculture, but it didn't actually get released on DVD until like 2012 because it never actually saw the light of day or got promoted or anything like that. It just went away. And there was one other I can't think of right now, at least maybe a couple others that I found that like the reason nobody's ever heard of them is because of the student uprising. So I mean, this stuff continues on in the ways that we disrupt. Again, like getting out the books, I'm thinking, if they're starting to ban books and, they're going to start banning books and stuff, we should be getting like, as many books as we can
get them out there
into people's hands. Yeah. So they have them. It's like, what good are they doing sitting on my shelf? Well, I mean, that's where I started was like, I got a lot of books on my shelf. I'm literally never going to be able to read all these. So I'm like, maybe if I get them out to some of these other people, they can read them and then they can, tell me what the heck they say or what bring some of the useful information out of them. But
well, you're planting seeds, right?
That's so the idea.
Yeah,
maybe hopefully
that's pretty awesome. Well, yeah, and it's like that. Like just something that we were talking about how the movement, the George Floyd movement, has sort of dissipated, but like the ember of it is still there.
It's still there,
and it's it's the thing that is wild is that to a certain degree, like this concept of the spectacle is the thing that has muted it, right? And so that's what's the stuff that I think about is how these movements begin, and then the system exists, to kind of to mute that,
and commodify it, like you said, and
right.
Make it something else.
And in the way that they opened the intersection back up to traffic, and the way that they've left the precinct buildings standing there this whole time,
right?
If we just kind of ignoring like the physicality, the memories that exist physically, if you can sort of take all of that energy and just kind of tamp it down just enough,
right?
Then you can get things, the system can get things back under control. And so,
it's true.
So and I don't know, I'm bad at this stuff. So of organizing and kind of being around other people. So I'm not, the fight is just so hard. That's
it's
the thing
true.
that just,
I mean, I have a history of organizing, but even then it's clearly there's things that aren't going, there's things that are going right. Maybe there's things that aren't going right. So again, that's why we're, trying to discover how we do this. And I personally think, everybody, or maybe not everybody, but a good huge portion of people have something to contribute to this whole
right,
discussion about how we move forward. I just don't think anyone, no one person, has all the answers for us. So
well, and that's kind of the whole, that's the whole point of it is, right, is that it's the community
I agree.
That's going to have the answer together.
Yep.
And there's one really, I shouldn't say one, but there's a couple stretches of really amazing alley art just north and east of George Floyd Square.
Nice.
Where one house has kind of has coordinated a couple of blocks, because it's pretty cool, because there's an aesthetic thread through most of the way that the garages and the streets are decorated, and you can tell that the community, on those couple of blocks are totally into it, and it looks great. And all of the stuff that they have up has to do with community and hope and everything. And it's I think we just get so wired into this idea that there's kind of one person who can lead us out of this situation, and then it's so easy to forget that it's just all of us.
Yeah, people are always waiting on experts. Even people I invite on my show, they're like, "Oh, maybe there's an expert on this or whatever," and I'm like, "Well, I don't know. There's been a lot of experts for a long time, and I mean, we're still kind of, that's something.
Well,
there's
where it's gotten of us.
Yeah, we need to at least get talking, and certainly I'm not saying don't listen to scientists or don't listen to experts, but I mean, they're just
right,
a handful of people, and wherever they are. And it's that's not necessarily gonna change things in your community. Well, I really appreciate you speaking with me, Matt. And
oh yeah, absolutely.
I think we should. I think we should talk again in the future sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would love that.
And that's our special interview. Thanks for listening. Solidarity.
This has been a Socialist News and Views special interview.